For our discussion today, I'm going to take a little bit different tact than I usually do because the passage that we're talking about has a great deal of emotion, a great deal of memory for me from the time that my wife and I spent in Korea. So I want to kind of tell you our story as international teachers and pastors, and also to be able to kind of outline what it means to be helpless, what it means to be up against the wall, to be surrounded on all sides by an enemy, and wondering what God could do. So I'm hoping that this passage will also be an encouragement to you if you've ever had your back against the wall and wondering if God will intervene. We're going to give you a new favorite number. People have favorite numbers of 3 or 7. My new favorite number is 185,000, and I'll tell you why. When I first went to Korea, I met the woman who would 3 years later be my wife, as part of a small group of teachers in Seoul who were attempting to start a new school in Seoul, and they had just faced an incredible number of difficulties in getting that school started. The school started with half the number of students that they had expected. That first semester, the the seminary that I was teaching with, went bankrupt, and so the school that my wife was teaching with just didn't have the resources to pay both of the rents, and so some of the teachers were beginning to wonder, and the principal was beginning to worry about whether they would be able to make payroll because of the pressures that were on this small first year school. Besides that, the principal was diagnosed with cancer and got the issue eventually taken care of. But it meant that first year there was an incredible pressurized time for those 4 teachers, for the principal and her family. And so I think in a large measure that small school was in feeling the kinds of pressures that maybe Hezekiah felt. And I can remember the pastor of the small church that those teachers went to asked me if I would teach this Sunday evening. And I remember one particular Sunday evening which I preached on this passage from Isaiah chapter 37. And I looked at some of the pressures that Hezekiah felt and related them to the kinds of pressures that the school was presently in. And it was an encouragement to all of us that when God steps in, incredible things can happen. So I wanted to tell the story in a way that maybe you are blocked in some way. Maybe you were feeling pressure from opposition on all sides and you're not sure what to do. See if you can relate to the pressures that Hezekiah felt. Hezekiah was facing the Assyrian war machine. The Assyrians had marched out of Nineveh and marched out of Assyria, and they had worked their way down the Mediterranean coast, taking the northern kingdom and deporting the northern kingdom of Israel so that the 10 tribes of the north become the lost tribes of Israel, because they are deported and people from other places are imported into the area, as well as leaving the poor of the land. And so the peoples that end up occupying the northern kingdom's land become known in the New Testament as the Samaritans. So the northern kingdom gets deported, smashed, and Sennacherib keeps moving city by city, town by town in Judah. He has taken them until he gets to Jerusalem, and he puts his army surrounding Jerusalem, and they are now getting ready for a siege. And the siege will be devastating when you look at the way warfare took place in the ancient world, and especially against Assyria. They were known for psychological warfare. We'll see that in a minute, as the way that they present their message, the way that they destroy towns, impale enemies, cut off hands and ears and eyes. Uh, they do so that nobody will ever want to rise against them again. So facing the Assyrian war machine was a horrible uh, option for you. And yet, this is what Hezekiah faced, as he's the king of Judah, but he's already lost a ton of territory. He's already scraped the gold off the walls of the temple and sent it off to try to forestall their coming. And yet they continue to come until they're here. And Sennacherib sends an ambassador to speak with Hezekiah about the coming siege. One city that fell, Lachish, they have carved a relief of the time, so you can see the relief of Sennacherib. You can see the people coming to give homage. On other places on this relief, you can see the people who are impaled on the rods. So as you're going out of the city, being led off into captivity with a hook in your nose, you would pass these impaling poles with friends, family, governmental leaders impaled, and watching them as they die as you head out of town toward captivity. It's one of those images that sticks in your mind so that you'll never rise against Assyria again. So it's interesting to look at the different things that are pictured in the relief at Lachish, because it gives us a real sense of what ancient warfare was like, and especially ancient warfare when you fought Assyria. So the ambassador comes to meet Hezekiah's men. The meeting place, according to our passage in Isaiah, is the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field, which just means Hezekiah is examining his water supply. How much water, how long will the water stored within the walls of the city last for the people of the city before water runs out? So what he's doing really is taking stock of everything. A siege means nobody goes in or out, so you have to have a stockpile of food, you have to have a source of water, you have to be prepared for what could be months, what could be years, as you battle the enemy as he tries to compromise your wall. So there's a warning that is sent to Hezekiah, and this is in chapter 36, and the warning is this, and listen to how they talk about God. Behold, Hezekiah, you are trusting in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it, such as Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar? Come now, make a wager with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses if you are able to, on your part, to set riders on them. How then can you repulse a single captain among the least of my master's servants when you trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Moreover, is it not without the Lord that I have come up against this land to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. Do you see the message? He's telling them, don't trust in God, because Hezekiah has torn down the altars. This is a misunderstanding of Hebrew religion. But the threat is, look, he's tearing down Yahweh's altars, so God's not going to fight. It's God himself who's telling me to come fight against Israel. Don't depend on Hezekiah, because his God isn't defending him anymore. His God is with me. In fact, I'll make you a wager. If you can get 2,000 people to ride horses and fight in our battle, I will give you the horses that you can put those riders on. Do you see it? This battle is not going to be hard at all. Hezekiah, you should just now surrender. That's the point. Well, the ambassadors, they're a little chagrined. They're embarrassed, and there are people gathering around the walls of the city to listen to what the ambassadors have to say. And so the the members of Hezekiah's team say, would you please speak to us in Aramaic? Speak to us in the trade language. It's a language we know, but the people don't know. So you speak to us in Aramaic, and we'll do our discussions and treaty, and we'll talk about terms of surrender in Aramaic, but don't speak in Hebrew because the people in the area will hear. And of course, the ambassadors, the diplomats from Sennacherib said, is it only to you that we have been sent? Aren't we also sent to the people of Israel? Still speaking in Hebrew, talk about a jab. Aren't these people the ones who will have to be deported? Aren't these people the ones who will have to go through the starvation and famine, who are going to have to eat their own? And it gets pretty caustic there about what they're going to eat and drink. But the ambassadors are again applying psychological warfare to look at the situation and get the people to not trust in Hezekiah anymore and his leadership. So what do you do if you're Hezekiah? Man, nobody wants to go up against Sennacherib, and now Sennacherib has beat your sister kingdom, has taken your cities all the way to the edge of Jerusalem, and you are in the middle of, well, you're surrounded, right? 185,000 soldiers sit right outside, and where can you turn? So he sends a message to Hezekiah. Hezekiah sends a message to Isaiah. Excuse me. This is a day of distress and rebuke and disgrace, as when people come to the point of birth and there is no strength to deliver them. The idea is now is the critical moment when, if ever, we must be relieved, right? A mother has been going through birth pains all the way to the point of birth, but now she's too exhausted to give birth. And that's the fear that Hezekiah has brought them right to the brink, and there's no energy left to fight this war, this last battle, to stop Sennacherib from completely engulfing the country. So they send for Isaiah, and Isaiah sends a message. There's another threat that comes from Sennacherib, and Hezekiah is just beside himself. And he does this, and I love this picture. He went to the temple of the Lord and spread the complaints out before the Lord. Just lays them out and makes this prayer to God. It's in Isaiah chapter 37. O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear all the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kingdoms of Assyria have laid waste all the nations in their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire. For they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they were destroyed. So now, O Lord, your God, so now, O Lord our God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are the Lord. Isn't that cool? When Hezekiah is against such a formidable enemy, he's surrounded, siege is about ready to wear on everybody down to nothing. He lays the complaint out before the Lord, reminds God that he alone is living, he alone is the one who can make a difference, and he alone is the one, ultimately and finally, who's been mocked by Sennacherib in his coming. So Hezekiah lays it out and waits for God to respond. Rather like we did at that school in Korea. Trying to start a new school opens with half the kids, and you try everything you can to try to make that school work, and there's no power to finally turn the corner to make it a success. Hezekiah again is approached by Isaiah this time, and Isaiah comes with a message from God that is going to inspire hope in the breast of every Hebrew person as they look outside at the invading army. The virgin daughter of Zion mocks you, Isaiah says. Send this message to Sennacherib. Because you have raged against me and your complacency has come to my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will turn you back on the way by which you came. So Isaiah says, Hezekiah, don't worry. We know that Sennacherib takes his enemies, his victims, and he puts hooks in their mouths, hooks in their noses, bits in their mouths, and drags them off into captivity. But I'll tell you that God is going to put a hook in the nose of Sennacherib and drag him back in the way that he came, and God is going to deliver Jerusalem in an inimitable way. Got to tell you, when you're facing real difficulty, to watch God work so incredibly is a great reminder we can trust him, because ultimately and finally he's going to deliver for us as well. So Isaiah sends the message to Hezekiah. Hezekiah sends the message to Sennacherib. And the next day, the siege is done. Sennacherib has beat a path back home, and in a few months he's going to be assassinated by his sons. But he goes back to Assyria, and there are outside the walls of the city 185,000 dead men. When God intervenes, there's nothing he can't do. I don't care how many problems you feel surrounded by, I'm almost sure the number doesn't rise to 185,000 people, which means God can take care of it. Now, he didn't ultimately, in one fell swoop, deliver that school in Seoul, but he did spare it, and the school did grow and did prosper, and now it has over 500 students in it, and it has nations. Even when we were there, it had 45 different nations represented in the school itself. So God delivered the school step by step until ultimately and finally it was free. So whether God delivers in a death angel marching out among the camp, or whether he delivers little by little, God can put a hook in the nose of your problems and my problems and turn them around and haul them back to the place they came from. I thought that would be a bit of an encouragement. So I love the story of Hezekiah, just because this explains in the divided kingdom stage why Assyria beat the northern kingdom, but why the southern kingdom survived. There was always a question when you read the annals of Sennacherib, where he talks about all of his successes and all of his victories all the way up to Jerusalem. And he says only, like for Hezekiah, I surrounded Jerusalem and shut him up like a bird in a cage. But what he doesn't do is say he took the city. And we have to read Isaiah 37 to find out what happened. Thanks for hanging out.